Here we go. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to get going. Okay, if you guys can see my screen, can you guys just drop it in the chat that you can see it? Or if you can't, that would be super helpful. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. Here we go. Awesome. Well, I'll make this presentation mode and then I'm just going to dive in. So here's the goal and the deal with this. We're going to try to pack in as much valuable content and information as possible. I think you guys are really going to get a lot of value out of today. First, I'll share about myself and about Serendipity, why we have a good perspective on this. So my background and history is I've owned 4 companies. First one was a software company in 2009, raised some capital, got started, built a whole product, eHip, and never got it to market. And so I was kind of left trying to figure out why the heck did people invest in us and we weren't able to get it to market. So I took a job at a private equity company where I studied venture shops and evaluated them and reported on them. But I knew I wanted to get back into the startup, like ground floor, building a company. So in 2011, me and 2 of my best friends started Profits for Purpose as a SaaS company. Our clients were Fortune 500, average deal size was about 50,000 ARR. We completely bootstrapped it. So I kind of pendulumed, raising money with eHip, pendulum raising no money with Profits for Purpose. And we bootstrapped it over the next 7 years, grew it, and we sold it in 2018 for 7 figures to a competitor that had raised. The competitor raised $1 million, then 5 million, then 40 million. And at 40 million, we were like, we got to decide if we want to try to raise money to compete or they made an offer and bought the company. And then, so that was SaaS, B2B SaaS. Near the end of that, I started a direct-to-consumer jewelry company, Poppy Medical. My sister was a Tiffany's trained jewelry designer and a type 1 diabetic. And if you have those types of conditions, you have to wear jewelry that says what condition you have. So if an EMT shows up, they know how to treat you. And so we made Poppy Medical, which was, so the only thing on the market was like CVS jewelry. And my wife's not wearing CVS jewelry. So we made just gold and silver jewelries and then grew that for a couple of years. And then I started it with my sister. She wanted out, so we sold that company as well. And that brings us to Serendipity. Serendipity is, through that journey, I realized my favorite thing was growth. My favorite thing was marketing and sales for specifically the B2B SaaS space. And so that's where we live and breathe is B2B SaaS growth. The ABCs that I'm going to share today, I learned at Profits for Purpose. So that journey, when we started, like I said, bootstrapped, we kind of grew it and we were on a roll, but we hit a critical point where nobody but myself or my 2 partners could sell the product. We kind of tapped out on our network of relationships and we were having trouble getting beyond that cap. We felt like growth was kind of stair-stepping. And then we really just dove deep and said, how are we going to get beyond our networks? And we implemented these ABCs. And it was really critical for us, especially being bootstrapped, as our competitors, like I said, were well-funded. When we started, so Profits for Purpose was employee philanthropy software. So a great case study would be like Estee Lauder wants to respond to Hurricane Dorian. So our software would already be hooked up to their HR system, their payroll. We would create an experience sharing, hey, this is what's happening there. This is how an employee can give. And so they could, all 25,000 of their employees could give. Estee Lauder could see that match dollar for dollar, communicate the story. So that was Profits for Purpose. We we implemented these ABCs of lead generation, and that was kind of the game changer for us. We were getting in front of a lot of deals, and if we could get in front of the deal, we had a really good win rate. And that was kind of the secret sauce for us, was these ABCs. So let me the ABCs, this is how I think about them. I think about them like attract, build, and close. And that's why they're called the ABCs. And then if you can think about those separately, when they combine, like that middle is when you can start really scaling and lay that foundation. And inside of these, this next slide is going to look a little dense, but then I'm going to simplify it. So in each of these three, this is what I've come to understand. In the attract, there's three strategies here. There's targeting, pain points, and lead magnets. The pain points is really critical in the attraction phase and stage. Think about, so it's not like, even think about when you attracted your girlfriend, boyfriend, or spouse. You didn't just talk about yourself. You talked about them, what mattered to them. You pursued them. And that's the concept here with the pain points. It's not, they don't care, like your customer does not care about your product. They care about what their pain points are. And so we want to dive into that. Lead magnets is how we effectively talk about the pain points. Build, there's referrals, there's a referral strategy we do, there's an outbound strategy we do, and there's LinkedIn ads. And in close, there's discovery calls, follow-ups, and closing. I could dive into all of these. What I want to do today, here's what I want to do. I'm gonna unpack three of them. The pain point strategy we use, the lead magnet strategy, and LinkedIn ads. And then if you guys have any questions beyond that, then we can dive into more if you want. So right now I'm going to ask, here's my question before diving in, is, oh, why is it not going? Let's see. I'm going to say, what's the hardest part about lead generation for you? And I'd love if you guys just drop in the chat real quick what that is for you. Take 1 second and just share that with me, and then we'll keep moving on. Finding the right channels to tap into. Yes, that's huge. So targeting, see, okay. Yep. Attraction stage. Yeah, man, I there's so much to dive into. I'm gonna keep moving on here. And I want to speak directly to a couple of those pain points. Real quick, let me check my Slack before we move on, just in case people are, okay, here we go. Couple more chats coming in, let me pull that up. Knowing the right messaging, yes. Finding the right channels, attraction stage, yes. Okay, yeah, and what's very, very interesting is as you dive into each of these, if you focus on each individually, then you'll see them start to line up, and I can explain more about that later. But I guess I'm gonna keep moving on for right now. Okay, what time is it? 10:13, here we go. We're gonna dive into the pain points first, you guys. This is super, super fascinating. Okay, so why I talked about it for a half second there, about kind of the analogy with like attracting your spouse, but why are talking to pain points important? First, you need to speak the customer's language. Like, not only like knowing the pain points, go back to that spouse analogy, not just knowing the pain points, but and what matters to them, but being able to effectively speak it in a way that they say, oh, this person gets me. You want copy that converts. You need to talk about pain points in context. That one is very, very important. If you jump off of a call with a prospect and you hear one pain point and you start putting a lot of things in motion, if you're on this call, you probably have a lot of influence at your organization. And so you could get people running in one direction, copywriters, ad dollars, all sorts of things. You need to take a step back and make sure that, okay, with everything, all the pain points, which ones are prioritizing, or which ones are going to give us the most runway, most bang for our buck. And most importantly, if you don't take the time to do this, you don't waste your time on your outbound strategies or your lead generation strategies or your ads or your referrals, because you need to have the right messaging by the time you get out there. So how do you do it? I'm going to walk you through the process we run all the time. So we have this 4 forces strategy. Someone a lot smarter. Oh shoot, I wasn't sharing my screen. Sorry guys. This was the slide I was walking through, why pain points are important, and there's 2 docs that I'm going to walk through. Okay, so 4 forces. Someone a lot smarter than me made this, came up with it, and it's incredibly, incredibly effective. So what you want to do is take a step back with your team and go over the frustrations, wants, fears, and aspirations. And just from a definition standpoint, when I say 4 forces, that's what I'm talking about. When I get to lead magnet in a minute, that's the other words you guys have normally heard for that ebook or downloadable PDF. But right now, we're just going to talk about the 4 forces. When you're out there doing outbound or LinkedIn ads or anything, you don't want to ask people to see your product. Once again, they do not care. You need to provide value, and you need to speak to their pain points. So here's how the exercise works. Frustrations and wants, think about them as immediate, right? Those are top of mind. Those are day to day. This is a frustration someone's having. And fears and aspirations are underlying. It's almost psychological. They're imagined, but they're very, very real. Maybe a difference is I'm frustrated with freaking Excel. It's taking too much time. That's a day-to-day frustration. But the fear could be, depending on the business, hey, this is taking too much time, and I might get a calculation wrong and have to lay off team members. I'm not going to be able to make payroll. Like that's like a much more underlying fear that you want to that is there, and it's kind of beneath the surface. So this exercise. And we can share these examples after this webinar, but here's the trick. You go one by one, you go for quantity over quality on this first pass. You need to think about your clients, you need to think about it how they would articulate their frustrations over a beer or a coffee with a friend. And common mistakes are frustrations and wants are not just opposites. It's like, this was an example from a client that's a commercial real estate developer. Like their client might say, I'm frustrated because I do not have enough space. And I want enough space to be productive. You see how it's not just like restating the exact same thing in a different way. But the trick is you go for quantity over quality, and you go through these as a team, okay? So that's kind of the first step. And then what you do is you come back here, and what my team does typically when we do this with a client, but you don't, by no means do you have to do it with us, but doing it, you can do it by yourself. As you start writing all these down, as you can see here, what my team did in this example is we started categorizing. We said, hey, this is kind of deals with implementation or branding, customer impact. And then you come over here, and what you do is you put all the frustrations down. You kind of put what category it is, and then you have your team rank them. So if there's 4 of you, do 4 across. In this example I'm showing you guys, there was just 2. 1s, 2s, or 3s. 1s being the most important, 3s being not as important. And what you do is, what becomes really what's fascinating in the conversation is who ranks something a 1 versus a 2 versus a 3. But what becomes really clear is, hey, these ones we all agree. This is getting context on these frustrations, wants, fears, and aspirations. But this says, okay, these are ones we all agree are priority number 1s. For wants, the same thing. For fears, the same thing. For aspirations, the same thing. So it can feel overwhelming sometimes to say, where do we start with what we talk about and what we put out there? But this is the kind of the first place to say, let's begin to have common language as a company. But how we talk about these things, let's talk about near term, long term, above the surface, underneath the surface, and then let's prioritize them together. I'm going to show you how this is incredibly impactful in the next step here. In the interest of time, I'm going to keep moving. Okay, so moving on to lead magnets. Here's what's really fun about this. I'm gonna move fast. I'm gonna try to pack as much value into this as I possibly can, and I'm literally walking you guys through what we do with clients on a weekly basis. We're onboarding clients with these strategies. Okay, so lead magnets. Here's the really fascinating thing. Once again, you need to provide value that addresses the pain point. But the challenge here is, like, how do you do this without spending thousands of hours and thousands of dollars? Because of my background owning a software B2B SaaS company where, man, maybe there was only 1,000 or 2,000 people in the country that had the authority to spend $60,000 to $80,000 with me. Flip that to Poppy Medical. It's a direct to consumer. I mean, there is literally millions of people that could spend. And so we have this incredible content strategy with that company. And what I've learned in full circle is content is incredibly important. But in the B2B SaaS space, you have to do it. One of my clients says you have to weaponize your content. And what that means is that you're not just creating content to create for content's sake. Every piece of content is very, very intentional. It speaks to these hot buttons, and it leads to them wanting to talk to you. I was trying to think of an analogy for this. I think one analogy is, I'm going to show you how to create a lead magnet, how we do it. But an analogy would be, if you ever sign up for like 24-hour fitness, you never started with, I want a gym membership. You probably started with, hey, I want to change my lifestyle, or I want to get a little healthier, things like that. So that's the pain point. The ultimate action is, I need to talk to a salesperson at 24-hour fitness, but you never started there. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to start at what the client cares about, and it needs to uncover. And then in the lead magnet, it says, hey, by the way, if you want to do that easy, like if you really want these things, then it's a no-brainer. You have to work with us. So I'm going to show you how we do that. So you take your 4 forces, and we have this hot buttons document. So what this is, and once again, we'll share this around so you guys can do this. But so you take a common thread. You say, okay, out of my 4 forces, which ones are kind of common threads? Maybe negotiating, company culture, right? I'm not showing the same like client. I want to show different variations here. But so this particular example is a client that they have donated checkout software. Some of the coolest, largest brands on the planet are their clients. But so their frustration, like a frustration here, is the good work for their client is unseen by customers. The client wants to look good. The fear is being seen as an evil corporation. An aspiration is to want to look good and be seen as charitable and innovative. So that's kind of one common thread. Do that for all the common threads you see. The hot button is just trying to summarize it in one sentence. I want my company to be seen as a good company. But then you ask, how can we help? Not with our software, but with content. How can we help? So we wrote, we can show several ways to make donations part of the consumer experience, so that every customer knows how the company is shareable and how they can partner. And okay, that's cool. And then we were like, okay, let's flesh that out a little more. What would the lead magnet be? We decided, and you come up with a cool name. We called it the Look Good, Do Good Guide. 5 ways to grow your brand through donated checkout. And then we started kind of bullet pointing. And so that's all we do here. And we do it 4 or 5 or 3 times, however many kind of common threads you see through your 4 forces. And then you rank them. And obviously in Google Doc, it's super cool. You just drag it and we just rank it top to bottom. And okay, so that's the hot button kind of like step. Step 2 is once you have, okay, here's our general outline, then you go to the drafting stage. This is done by you, okay? So a lot of this stuff you can hire a copywriter or a designer or something or someone to do. This step is done by you. It's an outline. And you define, okay, who's this going to? What's the hot button? What's the goal of this lead magnet, right? Goal of that lead magnet was to educate that, okay, and this is a totally different company and client like outline, but in this one, the goal was to show people how to integrate donated checkout, like 5 ways to do it. And then the sell, so this is where, I also call it the turn. Like you provide value that if they never used your software, never worked with your company, it would be valuable information. But all it does is kind of like make them more and more interested. In the end, it's like you present your company and you say, hey, by the way, to do this with us, this is who we are. So you bullet point the strategy. Then and here's my recommendation: make it SAGE, short, actionable, goal-oriented, easy. I didn't come up with that. That's a shout out to Dan Martell, came up with that. A B2B SaaS coach. But it can be a checklist, it can be a pro tip sheet, it can be a resources. But make it short and actionable and goal oriented. But the next step is then to write it. So now that you have the outline, now you make it professional, right? You can hire a copywriter, but make it really, really good. This example is longer than I would have personally done it, but I was working with the client on it, and it has a lot of really, really good value here. And then the last step is to design the lead magnet. So I can show that. I'll show one of ours here at Serendipity. This one, and truth be told, this might be how some of you have kind of come into our network, is through the Valuation Navigator is one of ours. Through my process selling to companies, I debated very heavily different ways to value the company. I realized through the process that valuing a company was similar to buying a house. Like there's market comps, there's a science behind it. And so I break down, the different things that are involved in valuing a company. And how it works for me is here at Serendipity is, some of the biggest decision points are growth, our growth rate and customer acquisition costs. And that provides true benchmarks to say, okay, if you can hit these, then you should work with Serendipity. If Serendipity can hit those for you, hire them long-term, because because it makes financial sense and your company will be valued at this amount. So you can see then, at the end, there's an ask that says like, hey, do like plug this in. And if you want to work with Serendipity, here's how you do it. So that's what I call the turn. But I'd say the most important thing here is do not cheat the process. And the reason is, if you have an enormous content strategy, I'm telling you, it's 10 to 15 times the cost of this strategy. But if you have a content strategy where you're putting a lot out there, that's more appropriate for a D2C brand, it's okay to be putting out a lot of content because you are measuring and seeing what's sticking. In this case, you're still measuring, but you have to be much more intentional about the pieces of content you put out there because they need to get more runway. And so I would encourage you, don't cheat this process. Spend the time to understand what pieces of content will resonate with who. Okay. With that said, so that's pain points, that's lead magnets. I'm going to keep moving here. Let's go to LinkedIn ads. And once again, I'm going to orient us for a second. We are in the ABCs of lead generation: attract, build, and close. And each letter, A, B, and C, has 3 primary strategies. On this webinar, we're going over 2 from attract and 1 from build. And then if you want to know more, we can set something else up and I can walk through more stuff. But these are ones that we're running all day, every day for clients. We live and breathe this. My background in it is owning a software company myself, that sold for 7 figures. And now I get the privilege and opportunity of doing this all day, every day with other founders and head of sales, head of marketing folks. And I love it. I love it. My team loves it, really, because we get to see trends, what's working, what's not. And it's allowed us to take a step back and define some of these things. So I've gone through pain points, the 4 forces exercise we do, the lead magnets, why they're so important, our process for getting, for like, it sounds kind of weird, but like what a client called weaponizing the content. In the build strategy, there's a referral campaign that we do. There's a few different outbound campaigns up here, but LinkedIn ads is what we're going to talk about right now. I'm gonna jump into some practical tips and tricks for running your LinkedIn ads. But okay, I would say incredibly important that you, before running LinkedIn ads, because now you're gonna start, not only is it the time and energy to understand the LinkedIn platform and how the ad platform works, there's the technical skill, but now you're pouring money into it and you're measuring your click rates and all sorts of metrics. And so doing that work up front, the pain points, the 4 forces, the lead magnets is what will pay dividends now. So let me give you some best practices. LinkedIn actually has a really cool new division that works with agencies like mine to help coach them. There's a lot of, obviously, through experience, through doing it for a long time, you learn a lot, but platforms are always evolving. LinkedIn recently spun up a division that just helps agencies run these. And so I've been on the phone with them a lot, learning different things. But okay, best practices change constantly. Here, understand this, LinkedIn is cheap real estate right now. LinkedIn is like buying property in Manhattan 100 years ago. If you try to do ads on like Facebook and Instagram are way more expensive today than they were a few years ago. Google ads are more expensive. It gets more and more crowded. That's the trend with these platforms, and it's what happens, right? It's simple economics, but it's the more people that get on and start bidding for people's attention, the more expensive it is. But the beautiful thing about LinkedIn, which is different than a lot of other platforms, it's first-party data. It's people saying, "Hey, I work for this is my title. This is where I work. This is where I live," like things like that. Best practices in your audience size for marketing, 50,000 to 500,000. LinkedIn really recommends industry function seniority over titles because they say that titles vary so much for different companies. I don't know. I would say, I have a client right now that is killing it with a title strategy. I have others that haven't got any traction with title, and so this industry function seniority is better. A/B testing there is recommended. And then for every ad, doing 2 to 4 creative options. $50 to $100 budget a day. 25 has to be the minimum to get any like data of what's working or not. And then 2 to 4 weeks worth of time to test the ads is what's recommended. The minimum I've been able to see is 7 days and $25 a day to get any real data. So that's LinkedIn ads. But here for creating the copy and the creative. So here's what you do. You go back to your 4 forces and you take the frustrations and the wants and you articulate them. And what it does is it stretches you. As you articulate them, it stretches the gap between the frustration and wants, and it makes more room for the product. So I'm going to try to show you how we typically will build our ads from a copy standpoint. Okay, so you take your 4 forces and then you grab your ad copy example. Let me just double check. Message on my Slack. I want to make sure it's not the team. Let me know anything relevant for this webinar. Nope, I think we're good. Okay, cool. Okay, so check this out. This is from literally from an example that we did. We took our 4 forces and we said, okay, let's take are you frustrated with not knowing how to manage employee workplace expectations in 2021? I'm frustrated with not knowing what next year will look like. Let's look at, I want to just try to like show you word for word. Happy. Okay. Do you want your team to be happy in their workplace? Happy. I want my workforce to be happy with their workspace. Keep in mind, like as we sat down as a team, this was a want that was articulated word for word, trying to be in the customer's shoes, like over a beer or over coffee. This is what they're saying. This is what my customer is saying. And even better yet, bring a customer in and get this language. And then it went through a prioritization process that everyone agreed this was a want. So you're literally just copy pasting it in. Same thing with frustration, same thing with fears, same thing with aspirations. And then look at this. For your copy, all you do is copy paste it. Are you frustrated not knowing how to manage employee workplace expectations? Are you afraid you might lose your best team members because you never see them? And then obviously you offer your lead magnet that you came up with. But do you see how that's literally taking the language that you're saying someone's using, you're prioritizing it to make sure. Now, as you start putting ad dollars behind this, it becomes weaponized. Let me show another example of how this looks. I want to show you then how this translates. But isn't this incredible? Like, is this making sense to you guys? How yes, you do some of the work up front, and then it makes this piece. Because here's what I really don't like. I'm frustrated in marketing where subjectivity, and there is a line where you need to involve your gut and your know-how of the space, but subjectivity can be very expensive. And so we want to try to bring as much objectivity to this as possible. And it starts in the interaction phase. And then once you get to this building phase, it makes things a lot easier. So look, this is how it looks. Then you copy paste that language exactly in here. You provide the lead magnet. And by the way, if you can do these ads in LinkedIn. So this is what's really, really special that LinkedIn has over every other platform is these lead forms in here. Because it already has people's contact info, it doesn't make them go to another page where then they have to scroll down and input their info because everybody drops off. Here, it becomes one click for them to submit. So it's incredibly, incredibly powerful. You can set the notifications for your team to see, okay, this is the reporting, this is how many people downloaded it, things like that. But yeah, does that make sense? Let's just pause for a second. I'm just looking to see who's here. Okay, cool. Yeah, so just drop a yes in the comments. I'd love to hear if anybody's had success with the lead gen form ads in LinkedIn yet. Have you guys been using it or no? And if no, like, are you planning on using it? So just drop a chat in real quick. I just want to see. How many people are kind of tracking with doing this. Okay, cool. Looks like we got some people that have already done lead gen ads that we say, okay, this strategy is brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, we've made this in conjunction with our clients over time, and we've ran these processes with the companies I've owned, and now we get the benefit once again of seeing what's working across the client base. So let me take a step back here. Even if you take the time and you do 4 forces, and you say these are the pain points, you do the lead magnets, you've created these beautiful pieces that people say, hey, regardless of if I ever use your product, I want to download this because I have this pain point. And then you start running LinkedIn ads to them, it creates a couple more problems inherently. How do you find the time to execute and track ads regularly in the best way? Once again, the platform's ever evolving. And then how do you even know if ads is the right strategy, right? I think that was the most common thing dropped in the chat here was what channel should I use? Should I use outbound as a drip campaign? Should I use outbound as basho? Should I use the account-based marketing? Should I use referrals? Should I use LinkedIn ads? So that's kind of like, yes, even if you do the attract piece, you've arrived at is LinkedIn ads really even the best way to go? And then even if it is, how the heck do you find the time to do it? I'd say maybe a third challenge here is not only the time to learn it, time to do it, but also the time to learn it. And if you have to learn it, are you going to learn it yourself and coach somebody else, or are you going to hire someone that already knows it? Then how do you know? How can you trust them? So that's where I'd like to introduce us. So this is what we do. Our vision is to be the #1 B2B SaaS growth agency on the planet. Like I said, we work with B2B SaaS companies. We work with, one of our clients is even a venture capital shop where they have us work with their investment portfolio and clients prospects that they're just potentially deciding to invest in, to say, hey, what can our cap numbers be? So all we do all day, every day is run B2B SaaS growth campaigns. And our goal is to be the best at it on the planet. And we want to help you understand which of those channels is right for you, whether it's the ads, outbound, or referrals. Working with someone like Serendipity, I'd say here's some of the benefits. Whether you work with us or somebody else, you free up your time to close the business, right? I mean, this is only one piece of the equation. I don't want to oversell lead generation, but I also don't want to skip over your responsibility of then bringing like those leads to signed contract. You get to learn from our collective client base. You don't waste time and money making mistakes. They can be very costly if you're not doing it right. And we're a proven entity. I think that one thing that's really unique about Serendipity is my background as an owner at a B2B SaaS company. And so I feel like I can't really speak for other agencies, but I feel like there's a level of like checking the boxes that we bring the weight of this needs to be positive ROI for you. And we really feel that weight. So once again, this diagram kind of brings up what I've seen in the chat is most people are most curious about what strategy to deploy here. My input there would be, it actually depends on your targeting and it depends on these three. And what the steps in the attract phase will inform the build phase. A couple of case studies from clients we work with. ChangeUp, they did outbound, sent about 12,000 messages for them. They invested about $40,000 with us over the course of 6 months, and it resulted in about almost $300,000 in client lifetime value revenue for them. So that's definitely a piece here. I believe that all these strategies really only work if your client value is at least $20,000 a year. Under that, I would actually pivot more toward Google search, where there's volume enough to bring in people. But a lot of these ABCs I'm presenting work if your client represents at least $20,000 in revenue for your company on an annual basis. Galley Solutions, they invested $12,000 with us. That resulted in $36,000 of lifetime value. Digital Intent, with them, worked with them for 12 months, sent 22,000 outbound messages, engaged in 450 conversations, resulted in over 100 meetings with brands Hyatt, Xerox, Capital One, Cisco. So this is the strategy to get big fish coming in. These strategies. Client quotes. Of all the money I've ever spent on marketing, Serendipity is by far my best investment, best lead generation partner I've worked with in my career. And then the last thing I kind of want to present is today, and why we're doing this webinar, is if you would like to work with Serendipity, we can offer a couple things for being on this webinar. One is a free consultation to determine the best build strategy as outbound referrals. So that's the first thing. And then the second is if you do work with Serendipity and you start by the end of March, sign contract by the end of March, we always have a $2,000 setup fee that we will waive if it's by the end of March. So that's that. And then if you're interested in either of those, I would just type your email in the chat box, and then that way we can follow up with you and find a good time. I'm just reading through some of the comments in the chat box right now. Yeah, but if you're interested in either that one-on-one with myself to look at, okay, which outbound strategy is best for you, and to be eligible for the waive setup fee, just type your email in the chat box, and then we can follow up. I think it's very, very worthwhile to. One question is considering setting up some LinkedIn ads. I'm assuming for an upcoming webinar. Do you think it's worthwhile? I would say absolutely. It's worthwhile. I've had clients that, but I think there's a couple of points, so I'd almost want to talk about it. I've had clients that have spent $1,500 in LinkedIn ad spend and to LinkedIn, and received over 100 RSVPs. I've had some that spent $1,000 and received 3 RSVPs. So there's a couple differences there that I would have some follow-up questions to determine if that's the right strategy or if there's a different way to go. But let me see here. Screenshot this. Then I'm gonna keep moving. Yeah, and with that, I mean, this webinar is scheduled for an hour. I was kind of flying because I didn't want to run out of time. I was going through a lot of dense content, but I want to pause for a second and just see if there are any questions in a Q&A that I can spend a minute answering. So yeah, if there's any questions, just drop them in, and I'll spend the next like 5-10 minutes answering as much as I possibly can, and then we can kind of move on from there. So I'll pause for just a second. Let's see. What do you think about running inbound campaigns instead of these outbound campaigns? Okay, that's a really good question. While I address this one, if there's any other questions, just drop them in. Okay, so inbound versus outbound, how I view those, I view in the life cycle of a company, especially a startup, I view it stacking. So the bottom is sales. You need to close deals. Then here's a very common mistake that most leaders make is they jump to inbound. And it makes sense, right? I mean, as a consumer, you see all these direct to consumer companies, and the way you think about marketing is, hey, I need to get my name out there. I need to pay for an article or PR or something. But the biggest mistake I see is they skip lead generation. And the benefit of going from sales to layering in lead generation is that it gets you right in front. There's a few benefits. It gets you right to the decision makers. So once again, so you can measure ROI, but 2, it gets you talking to them. And so that you're gaining. A lot of products start by a founder or someone having a very limited view on a problem, and then it evolves as they grow. And so it gets you talking to them. And so by the time you evolve to the point where now it's time and appropriate to launch your inbound strategy, now all the work you've done with sales, getting customers, outbound, talking to prospects, now you have a wealth of information and knowledge to build on that justifies the incredible expense of building an inbound strategy. So that would be, I think inbound is incredible, but I think it needs to be thought about in terms of when and where do you put it in. So that's my 2 cents there. see here. Okay, let's look at, there's another Q&A. Let me go take a look at it. How do I bring this up? What are some oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to read you the question if you're having trouble finding it, but sounds like you got it.
Yeah, I can see it. What are some recommendations you'd give to building business alliances with big fish as a startup? Just a little background, we are a blockchain database SaaS company. Yeah, I think that business alliances are an incredible way to fast forward, to catapult the growth, right? I think something, but I would say, I have a couple thoughts on this. You may have already done a little bit of thought about this, but I think just finding the shared audience is going to be key, right? So that they're in front of the groups that you want to be in front of. That's kind of a no-brainer. I think it's a great strategy. I don't think it's the leading strategy because for a couple of reasons. One, there's a lot out of your control, right? And you can't measure. A lot of times you can't measure it. So the outbound strategies, you're measuring the ROI at every step of the way, and you're becoming more and more valuable to a big fish. And then the other piece here is, so here's my experience at Profits for Purpose, because we explored this quite a bit, and we got a couple conversations down the line pretty far. And so I don't have experience to say this is the way to do it, but I can tell you the challenge we ran up against. And that was, as we got through due diligence, they had a dollar amount for training. Think about, they have a sales force, they have a team of people. The investment for them to get it in front of everybody and then like deploy it was a certain dollar amount. And so the return they needed, it was really, it's kind of like buying your first home, where like everyone's like, oh, real estate's great. Then you run the numbers and you're like, wait a minute, I pay 1% in taxes every year. I pay another 1% in repairs. I pay 3% in interest. All of a sudden you've paid 30 grand a year just out the door, and you run the numbers and you're like, holy crap, this doesn't make sense. As an investment, you're like, a home is a home because you love it. That's kind of the same analogy. I think it like is really sexy, but then you run the numbers and it's very, very difficult to make sense for the big fish. So I guess that's the experience I have with it. But on the flip side, when it does work, it can rocket ship you. And so my advice with it would be to not like bet on black with it, to not be like, this is the only strategy. It'd be like, build value regardless, and like, devote some energy to building that. So that, I guess that's my 2 cents on it. Okay, so that one's answered. I wonder if there's more. Let's see here. Cool. Cool comment from Gabe. Thanks for sharing your info, Gabe. Appreciate it a lot. Okay, with that being said, I'll give it another like 15 seconds here, but if there's no other questions, then we can call it a day here and keep moving. I think there's nothing else. So if this is valuable, I hope it was. I've seen these strategies be incredibly effective.